I swept the east undercroft of Erdenhall Palace for 31 years, and in all that time, I never once needed a broom in there. Nobody walked through the undercroft anymore. The old atrium roof had cracked 2 governors' back, and by the time the money was found to fix the embassy's main halls, nobody remembered there was a reason to fix that one too. So they sealed it, and forgot it, and I kept the key. Every third morning, while the rest of the staff polished the floors where actual dignitaries walked, I let myself into that silent hall and swept dust that never had the chance to gather, because there was no one left in there to make any. I want to tell you I don't know why I kept going. That would be a lie. My mother swept that same hall, back when it wasn't forgotten. Back when the nursery court still rang with hatchling noise, and the high windows let real morning light fall across a floor crowded with warming eggs. She used to hum to them while she worked, low in her throat, the way you'd hum to a colicky child. I never saw a hatchling in that hall in my life. I hummed anyway. Some habits outlive the reason for them. I was 61 years old the morning I found him. He'd come in through the cracked roof, is my guess, because there was no other way in, and the old service door was still bolted from my side. He'd folded himself into the far corner of the atrium where the light used to be strongest, under the broken dome, and he'd gone very still in the way that only something enormous and dying can go still. Not asleep still, but the stillness of a thing conserving what little furnace it has left. His scales had gone the gray gold of old brass left in weather. One wing lay wrong beneath him. His breathing came slow enough that I stood in the doorway a long while, just to be sure it was breathing at all. I did not run for the wardens. I want you to understand that before anything else, not because I was brave, but because I looked at the size of him, at the careful way he'd folded himself to fit under that one patch of open sky, and I understood, the way you understand things without being told, that he had not come here to be found by wardens. He'd come here to be somewhere quiet. And I was, God help me, the quietest thing left in that whole palace. So I set down my broom and I sat, the way I might sit with anyone in a hospital bed who hadn't asked for company, but hadn't the strength to send it away either. He opened one eye. It was old. I don't just mean aged, I mean old, the way a mountain is old, like the eye itself remembered things before the palace had a name. His voice, when it came, wasn't sound so much as a low pressure behind my own thoughts, the way distant thunder announces itself in your chest before your ears catch it. You still sweep this floor, he said. I remember the sound of it. I told him I didn't understand. I told him nobody had used this hall in decades. I did, he said, before there was a palace around it, before there was a wing to forget. This was a nursery court once, and a woman swept this floor and hummed to us while we hatched, and I have carried that sound farther than I ever meant to carry anything. I asked him, foolishly, if he meant my mother. He said he meant a woman 4 generations before her, and that the humming had simply never stopped being handed down, the way a name is handed down, or a debt. I won't pretend I understood everything he told me in the hours that followed, because a great deal of it came to me sideways, in pressure and old memory rather than plain words. But I understood enough. He told me his name was Threnvax, and that he had been born in that court under that same broken dome before it was ever broken, back when the alliance between our 2 peoples was young enough that no one yet trusted it to hold. He told me he had spent 3 centuries making sure it held, as counselor, as witness, as the one old enough to remember why the promise had been made in the first place, long after the ones who made it were gone to dust. He told me he had outlived every creature who remembered his hatching, and most who remembered his first century of guarding it, and that when the ache in his chest told him his heart was finally slowing for good, he had flown a very long way, past guards who never thought to look for him going in the wrong direction, to die in the one place that had never once asked anything of him. I did not tell anyone. I want to be honest about that too. I could have. I had a duty, probably, to send word up through the household, to whoever still kept the old alliance records. Instead, I brought down a blanket from my own quarters, because the fabric requisition office would have asked questions I didn't have the patience for, and I sat with him through that whole first night, and I hummed, badly, the same tune my mother used to hum, because it was the only thing I had that seemed to belong in that room. He asked me, somewhere in the second day, why a woman who cleaned floors for a wage would spend her few off hours sitting beside a dying stranger instead of resting. I told him the truth, which was that I had swept an empty room for 31 years out of nothing but a hum passed down from my mother, and that an empty room with someone real in it, even dying, felt less strange to me than the empty one I already knew. That seemed to satisfy him more than anything grander would have. He told me other things that second day, when the pain in his chest eased enough to let him talk. He told me about the treaty signing he'd witnessed as a young dragon, barely out of this same nursery, how the humans of that age had been so afraid of dragonkind that the first ambassadors had worn armor to the table, and how it had been a groundskeeper, not a lord, not a general, just a groundskeeper who'd once pulled a drowning hatchling from an irrigation ditch, whose testimony had finally convinced both sides the peace was worth the risk. He said he had thought of that groundskeeper more times across 3 centuries than he'd thought of any king. He said it was always the ones who never expected to matter who ended up holding the whole thing together, and that he supposed that was why he'd come back here, at the end, rather than to any hall with his name carved over the door. He died on the morning of the 3rd day, with the weak light coming through the broken dome the way it must have come through when the dome was whole, and he did not ask me to carry any message, and he did not tell me to seek out his kin, and he did not, at the very end, tell me anything I could repeat as a dying wish, because he had already told me everything he wanted told, and the rest, he said, was mine to keep or let go as I saw fit. I chose to send word. It took the household 3 days to work out who to send it to, because nobody living had catalogued Threnvax as anything but a rumor, an old counselor who was said to have vanished into retirement 2 centuries back and never resurfaced. It took the Skywing court longer still to believe an aging palace cleaner had been the one sitting with him at the end, rather than the one who'd let a dying elder starve unattended in a forgotten wing. I don't blame them the suspicion. I'd have doubted me too. The young sovereign who eventually came, Threnvax's own great-granddaughter, though she hadn't known where to look for him any more than the rest of them had, did not arrive with any procession, and there was no long line of bowed heads waiting to greet her when she stepped through the cracked roof's light into that hall. She simply stood a long moment over where he'd lain, and then she sat down on the cold floor beside me, in her travel clothes, uncrowned, and asked me to hum the tune again, because he'd sent word ahead through the old court records, before any of this, that there was a song in that room worth remembering. So I did, and she sat with me until the light moved off the floor entirely, and neither of us said very much else, because there wasn't much left that needed saying. They reopened the Undercroft's roof within the month. Not for ceremony, she was firm about that, and I was glad of it, but because she said a nursery court shouldn't stay broken over the head of anyone who'd once been hatched beneath it, and that included, she said, whoever came next. I still sweep that hall. I don't need to anymore. There's a whole staff assigned to it now, younger hands than mine, better backs. But I go anyway, every 3rd morning, because some habits outlive the reason for them, and because I like knowing that if anyone else ever needs somewhere quiet to be found, the floor underneath them will already be clean.